Howdy again everyone. I really like wide-angle lenses with bright maximum apertures, and that's what we have here today, the 7Artisans 28mm f1.4 aspherical. It's for mirrorless cameras and comes in Leica M mount, but can easily be adapted onto Sony E mount cameras, so it's got a little market share there too. It's £500 in the UK, or about $500 US. It's a fully manual lens, manual focus and manual aperture. I'd like to thank 7Artisans for sending me a copy for testing, although as usual this is an independent review. 7Artisans are quite well known for selling a lot of very inexpensive manual focus optics for various mirrorless camera systems, and I've reviewed some of their cheaper lenses on this channel before. But they also market a line of slightly higher quality manual focus lenses, which seem to take their cues from Leica's lens designs, even being sold in Leica M mount bodies. In fact, if you want to use this particular lens on a Sony camera, as I mentioned, you will have to use a Leica L to Sony E mount adapter like this one. It's still potentially a very desirable lens though, whatever camera system you're using. 28mm is a good, wide angle, leaving you with quite a neutral perspective on your scene, and f1.4 can really help you shoot in darker situations and get noticeably out of focus backgrounds. On seeing its rather small size, you might be surprised to hear that it's actually a full-frame camera lens. What a lovely compact design, although that could lead to some problems with vignetting, more on that in a minute. But it sure looks the business and feels fantastic to hold in your hand, like a really high quality instrument made of metal with tight tolerances. Even the focus ring is made of metal. Its ridges feel slightly hard-edged on your fingers, however it does turn exceptionally smoothly and precisely, making focusing manually quite easy, even at f1.4. As you change focus, the lens displays a little focus breathing, as you can see here. You can also see that this footage has a slightly red colour cast to it, something I noticed about this lens at all apertures while I was testing it. Above the focus ring comes the aperture ring. The f-stops are not evenly spaced, but you do get a gentle click at each one, which is very satisfying for stills photographers. The lens does not come with a hood, which is a bit of a shame, but it does have a very nice slip-on lens cap, which fits in place nice and securely. Its filter thread size is a small 52mm wide. Overall, it's a very nicely built and functioning manual focus lens, which looks cool and is much smaller than you'd expect for an f1.4 model, although I do wish it came with a hood. Well, let's move on and look at image quality now. I'll start by testing it on a full frame camera, my 42MP Sony A7Rii. Straight from f1.4, we see pretty sharp image quality in the middle, albeit with a touch of horizontal ghosting, which slightly reduces the definition on contrasting edges. The image corners are pretty dark from vignetting, and that ghosting has greatly increased, although there's still a reasonable amount of detail to be seen there. Let's drop down to f2. We don't see much more brightness, unfortunately, but a lot of that ghosting has disappeared, leaving behind a sharper image, and picture quality back in the middle is even better. Stop down to f2.8 and the middle looks absolutely perfect, and the corners look impressively sharp too, although still not really any brighter. f4 and f5.6 get even sharper, and the lens remains this sharp all the way down to f11, although frustratingly that darkness from vignetting still remains. But generally, the lens gives a sharper performance than I was expecting to see, being able to produce quite some resolution and contrast, particularly when it's topped down a little bit, and we see little in the way of colour fringing too. If you can take care of that slightly red colour cast and that vignetting and editing, then you'll end up with some pretty sharp images. Okay, let's move on and look at distortion and vignetting. The lens projects just a little barrel distortion in a moustache pattern, but you'll never really notice that in real life shooting. As we've already seen, vignetting is a serious problem for this little lens, and at f1.4 there's plenty of it. Stop down to f2 or f2.8 for slightly brighter corners, but there we reach rather a plateau, and vignetting remains at this level even down to f5.6 or even darker apertures, so you'll definitely want to correct that in editing. Next, close-up image quality. A very frustrating thing about this lens is that it can only focus down to about 70 centimeters. That is very, very far away for such a wide-angle lens, meaning that your subject will always have to be, well, quite far away. At f1.4, close-up image quality is a little softer, but still not bad. Stop down to f2 for that sharpness to make a nice return. Next, work against bright light. It's not a great performance here. We see quite a bit of flaring and glaring whenever bright lights are in the picture, as you can see here. And while we're shooting in the dark, let's take a look at chroma levels. At f1.4, we see some chroma smearing on bright points of light in the corners of your images, although I have seen worse than this before. Stop down to f2 or f2.8 to tame it down a bit. Now let's take a look at bokeh. A maximum aperture of f1.4 would normally get you some pretty out of focus backgrounds, but that very long minimum focus distance works against the lens here. When you do throw your backgrounds out, the quality of the bokeh is reasonably soft, no real problems to report here. So then, overall, my test results were interesting due to a number of strengths and weaknesses this lens displays. I wasn't completely sure what to think of it really. Its build quality is certainly lovely, even if you need an adapter to get it on your Sony camera. More importantly, it's pretty sharp, even at f1.4, and that was a pleasant surprise for me. And remember that f1.4 aperture can really help you to shoot in darker situations and get somewhat out of focus backgrounds. While another of this lens's strengths might be its lovely small size, that in turn directly causes one of its biggest weaknesses, very strong vignetting, even when your aperture is topped down for landscape pictures. Combined with a noticeable colour cast, this is not a lens for people who don't like editing their photos. Also, I hated that minimum focus distance of 70 centimeters, which is very poor for a wide-angle lens. You can absolutely forget about getting images anywhere close to a smaller subject here. So it's a mixed bag. A bright aperture, good sharpness, good build quality, and a small size on one hand, miscellaneous image quality problems, and a very long minimum focus distance on the other. As usual, it's up to you whether this lens can fit your needs.